So, in continuation of my previous, lecture on arrival of writing, now let us move ahead to see what are the problems we face in reconstructing the history of language. That's why I have titled this lecture as Reconstructing Language History. Because this is also, these 2 points I would say familiarity with writing and development of language are quintessential parts of history, construction of history. If we want to write, of that period, especially ancient India. So as I had told you, that prehistory is defined as the period of human life for which we have no written records. Only the physical remains are there. From there, we will have to reconstruct history, which are studied by archaeology or the archaeologists, and they may be held to constitute our sole source of information, only solitary source of information, till you get something in writing, some evidence of writing comes. For all practical purposes, period called proto-history is also not much different. I refer to Indus civilization period. Since we cannot read, as in the case of, as I said, Indus script, the written material that has come down from it remains not of much use except some, subsidiary, secondary, you can say, of secondary value. But from the point of view of language, till they are deciphered, they are adjuncts for us, adjuncts of a civilization. There remains, one possible source of information, namely the language survivals. Have the language survived? If the language survived, in what form? So, languages existed long before they came to be written down. I give this example to everybody. The child, when he is born and he is, trying to grasp what the language of the parents or his close associates are, he doesn't know how to write A, B, C, D or Abasa. He is picking up by the movement of the lips, according to Wittgenstein's thesis. So he is knowing from cognition, from his ability to recognize how to put the lips together and to speak some language which should be understandable to his parents or his close by people. So that's why I'm saying that oral would precede and should precede before they are written down. If we can establish what words and names, both personal and place names, survived from those times, and what such words meant, like plow, hut, mother, father, cattle or horse, deity or ghost, etc., we can reconstruct, at least in part, material conditions, social relationships, and beliefs of the people who use these words. This becomes possible from a study of the vocabulary and syntax or sentence structure of early languages from the time they were written down and from the time they have come down in written form to us. The broad discipline under which the study falls is known as linguistics. More properly, we can also say historical linguistics, because we are dealing with that kind of thing. So, that branch of linguistics, which by comparing the vocabularies, structures of different languages, attempt to reconstruct the past, is called philology. Philology is very important, and or comparative and historical linguistics. So, the comparative methods developed by philology enable us to see which language are genetically closer to each other, linked with each other, that is, have a common ancestor if they can be traced, as in the case of Indo-European Aryan languages. They have been found to be having many close, vocabularies and other things. Given such common ancestry, they have evolved in different directions in respect of both word forms and sentence structures. Word forms and sentence structures. By meticulous comparisons between two or more than two language groups, a genealogical tree of languages can be built up. A large language family being made up of subfamilies of languages, branches, or groups can be made up. Ultimately, we can trace, we can make it, we can trace the origin of the language by streamlining all our informations. So, when ultimately we reach to the top, we will have partial vocabulary of an ancestral language which does not itself exist now, but we can have that. The procedure we have described here will give you a better idea. In the Indo-European family, the word horse is Ashwa in Vedic Sanskrit, and it is called Aspa in Avestan Persian. So, since Avestan language attests a change from V to P, therefore the ancestral language of the group to which the two languages belong is called Proto-Aryan. Must have had the word Ashwa for the horse. Should have that. An asterisk precedes the word to show. The asterisk I have given here, you can see this. This has been done in order to show that the word is merely a reconstructed one, and there being the existence of no Proto-Aryan text containing it. Otherwise, how can you say that this is Proto-Aryan? This is our historical controlled speculation, which I was emphasizing right from my first lecture. So now, Proto-Aryan was a Satem language, that is, language in which K in certain words tends to be converted into S. This is not K, this is H. In Centrum languages, where this has not happened, the words for the horse include Yaki, Yakwe. In Tocharian Western China, from that word, that animal yak is known as, for say animal of that kind in Western China. In Latin, it becomes icus. In ech in Old Irish and eo in Old English, leading to ultimately equest. In English, we say equestrian, relating to horse sciences. So, such words being similar and taken as descended from the same ancestral language are called cognates. So, when you compare these cognates in different language groups, you can know the affinity of those languages amongst them. So, we infer from these that there was a word for horse in ancestral language of the entire Indo-European family, Proto-Indo-European, and that is the likely form of that word was Equos. Such reconstruction of words are achieved by the study of etymology. Etymology is simply the history of each word. You go into the history of when was this word first used and what did it mean at that time, traced by comparing its forms and senses from its earliest occurrence in each language. What did they mean by that? And then by locating similar forms in other languages in order to arrive at common ancestral form, on which point there should be a common consensus also among the historians. So much etymological work is concerned with identifying words that have entered one's language or one language from another language belonging to a different branch of family. Such words are termed as loan words. Nowadays, this is very common, every year or every certain period of time, Oxford English Dictionary keeps on adding, terms or words of many languages in their own language, English. Wherever the English language is being spoken, it's in currency, they are also adopting the local languages so that people can understand the meaning of it. So, which the exercise Ashoka had done much earlier, around 200 3rd century BC. So, for example, lathi charge. Lathi is an Indian word, Hindi term. Charge is English, but that is the part of dictionary. One thing I would like to suggest here, remind my students is that whenever you consult a dictionary, if the vocabulary, the word is not in italics, it is in normal font, then think that it has been accepted as a term acceptable in that major language. For example, lathi charge, it will no more be, you will not find written in italics. Lathi charge will be simply straight letters. So that means it has been accepted. So these are the loan words, and every language is, every language enriches itself by borrowing words from other languages. It enriches its scope. The word for betel leaf is tambula in Sanskrit. How it becomes pan, I will tell you later. Sanskrit and tambul in Persian, it is called tambul in Persian, but there is a loan word from the former to the latter. There was therefore no Proto-Aryan word like tambula endowed with this meaning because we don't have a text. Etymologists also have to avoid building on chance similarities. This is the word of precaution. Tamil, a Dravidian language, has the word onnu, which looks very similar to the English word one. So you can't say that one is derived from Tamil language, which is also what it means. Similar meaning is there, but the English word has its Indo-European root, ultimately linked to the Sanskrit form eka, Hindustani ek, and from which a mode of transport is also identified, ekka, where only one horse is yoked. So, ek, which has no similarity with the Tamil word. Finally, one has to guard against a change in sense. The word may remain the same, quite possible, but it may mean something quite different. I had given you one example in my first lecture. The Vedic word yava means barley, but since cognate forms in other Indo-European languages either mean grain in general or some other species of grain, the original Proto-Indo-European word is also held to mean grain alone. Similarly, the term dhana, we now say dhan is for rice. No, this earlier didn't mean that. It just meant seeds. I can multiply such examples. Once, by careful use of science of etymology, a genealogical tree of a language, as I was saying earlier, language family has been built up, and we can set, the various changes in some order of sequence along the same line of descent. This can be done. Thus we know that the split of Proto-Aryan and Proto-Indo-European came after the ancestor of the Albanian language had split off from Proto-Indo-European, and that old Indo-Aryan split off from the Proto-Aryan first and old Iranian later, and so on. Roughly, judging from the extent of change, this is known as language shift. One can estimate the amount of time which has passed in between each split. The procedure known as glottochronology. This seeks to lend considerable precision to such estimates by making use of a method of lexicostatistics. You collect words after words and then try to correlate and then try to build up the the history of language in a sequence. That becomes a number of basic words are selected, and then the extent of vocabulary replacement is determined within each language. It's very scientific with reference to these words. Then it is based on the assumption that uniform rates for equal degrees of such replacements. The period is calculated when the language studied is split off from its original parent language. By applying this technique, beginning of Proto-Indo-European is held to be no earlier than 5000 BC. And the split between the ancestral languages of Vedic Sanskrit and Latin is considered to be around 3300 BC. After such a long gap, such dates are not in themselves unreasonable, but the method itself is open to many objections, serious objections. One of these is that the factors which influence vocabulary replacement are so varied that it cannot be assumed that linguistic changes everywhere at all times would proceed at a given tempo, at a given speed, or at a given scale. Therefore, and this would bring into the question the very fact of precision which glottocronology people try to make argument for, that is claimed. Let us now return to the vocabulary of ancestral language of each family or branch which the philologists are able to establish. Such reconstructed vocabulary will always be incomplete, so that we can establish with some confidence what things the people spoke, the reconstructed old language were familiar with, but we cannot deduce their ignorance of certain things from the absence of words for them in the reconstructed vocabulary. I mean to say that if that word is not there, you can't say that they were not familiar with this word. They might have been. There's all chance. There are also other difficulties, associated difficulties. For example, the territories where language is spoken are spoken, shift. And it is not always easy to fix when did this change take place from the available vocabulary. Where particular languages were spoken, in particular, per prehistoric times, here a device based on isoglosses may be of some help. The historical linguists, they are taking help of isoglosses. It's a scientific thing. An isogloss is the boundary line between two linguistic traits plotted on a map. Suppose we find that within one zone of the territory of a language, both consonants L and R are properly in use, but that in a particular zone L supplants R in all words, then the latter consonant is not in fact used at all. This problem I had already discussed in my previous lecture when I spoke about Ashoka's preference for such kind of things. He was taking cognizance of the local language sensitivities. Somewhere it is written Raja, then it is Raja in other place. So in the Jaipur Bharat inscription, it is Raja proper. But if you go to the Vaishali or Sagoda inscription, you will find Raja is there. So these kind of, we have now, those experts who are dealing with history of Ashokan scripts, their studies, we have now successfully identified basically 4 dialects are there. Dialect A, dialect B, dialect C, dialect D, depending upon these smaller variations. So, I give you one example, So, this is the case with Ashokan Prakrit, 3rd century BC, where R and L zones can be separated with the help of an isogloss. That look here up to this area of the country, L is there. From here, R becomes important. Priyadarshi is properly spelled. Piyadasi is properly spelled in the area where Bagadi Prakrit is influential. So, suppose there is a substrate language and which is not otherwise known, but its territory can be identified by drawing an isogloss based on Ashokan inscriptions, which has been done. It has been done by Professor Irfan Habib in one of his books. He has tried to locate, he has given these isoglosses. You can see that this was Aramaic Greek. This is the area of Afghanistan where you have, the inscriptions written in Ashokan Prakrit as well as, in other languages, Aramaic, even Sanskrit, Aramaic and Kharoshthi. This is the Indus region. So this is L only zone, Delhi and other places you will find L and R zone. So this is a mixed zone, and then this is South Godavari, and these are the areas which are again very important from that point of view. So most languages tend to be spoken in geographically defined regions, since their spread depends on, this is true of modern times as well, on the degree of human interaction. People tend to mix more and intermarry within such regions, so that in the course of time a broad correspondence between genetic and linguistic frontiers begins to emerge. Broad, correspondence emerge. But such correspondence is misleading, sometimes very, very misleading. So don't go by, as I say, in lighter vein, I say, don't go by instant linguistics. You find a word and say that, look here, this was up to this area. No, it has its own pitfalls. There are no genetic controls by which one person speaks. This I had also said when I was talking about in my previous lecture about Turkic people. So one person speaks one language better than the other. In other words, the particularities of pronunciation are transmitted not by birth, but through what a person hears, as I was saying, especially in childhood, both at home and outside. Thus, there is no necessary association between a language group and a genetic group, which in popular parlance is called a race. There is racial theory of race has already been discarded by scientists on the basis of their study of the DNA of human beings. We have been found now there is a general consensus that we all belonging to one stock. So this can be shown by many examples. For example, Turkic is relatively young family of languages. I have already spoken about it. No older than 1500 years. Now spoken over a large area of Europe and Asia. Much of the spread of this language was caused by migrations over a period of time, in terms of centuries, originally from Mongolia and Western China, that are fairly well documented by historical sources, and they have been studied. Yet, if you talk to the modern Turkish people of Turkey, the leading Turkish-speaking country, are Caucasoids, genetically very close to Greeks and quite distant from the oldest Turkic-speaking people, the Uyghurs of Western China, who are northern Mongoloids. In India, no marked genetic differences are observable among speakers of the Munda, that is Austro-Asiatic, Dravidian and Indo-European languages, all being classed as Caucasoids. There cannot therefore be an Aryan or Indo-Iranian race, and even less an Indo-European one. I end here. My thrust in today's lecture was that how the script is important, how the knowledge of language is very important in any interpretation of any history or any historical enterprise. So we will have to take into consideration all these skills which are contributed by our auxiliary sciences, and that brings me to the close of the impact of auxiliary sciences, how they are helping us in reconstruction of history. Thank you very much.